Welcome to the XY Advisor podcast. To join a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice, head to xyadvisor.com. G'day, how's it going? What do you know? Striker like Clayton here from XY. Have the privilege, nay the pleasure of finally securing the guest of Harry. Mate, how are you?
Well, like I said before, Clayton, I feel I'm the privileged one because I'm sitting here in my humble hobbitness with the grand Hugo boss of the world.
That is so brutal. But I'm gonna somehow interpret that as a compliment. Thank you, good sir.
It is. I promise you it's a compliment. The first time I sort of got to see your work ethic and your attention to detail was a fair few years ago now. And it was around some estate planning stuff. It was certainly around some digital assets, and you were sort of discussing things that needed to be discussed, and no one else was discussing it. You were sort of bringing these subjects into conversation when, I mean, let's face it, financial planning is one of the most conservative and slowest moving industries, unless, of course, you're the government, in which case then it apparently moves very rapidly. But beyond that, it does take time. It does. We like to sort of stick to what we know. And you were discussing some really, modern things like digital assets. And that was the first time I sort of was introduced to the way that you think about things. And then I've sort of followed you from afar, since that time. And even interestingly, you're one of the people that sort of reaches out the most and helps the most. And in fact, we had to organize this podcast at a time where the two interns in your office you weren't going to miss out on helping them. And I just thought that was very sort of full circle for the way that you approach this stuff, mate. So let's learn a little bit about Harry for once, shall we? Okay. So what do you want to know, Clayton?
How on earth how did you get into advice?
There's a gentleman by the name of Peter Sobels who owns Risk Info, and he asked me the same question during a similar sort of interview at the MDRT in Miami last year, and I'll say the same thing to you that I said to him. As a 16-year-old kid, many moons ago, I was destined to do something in math science. So, the Sheldon character from Big Bang Theory?
Yes.
That is me. Who knew that I was socially awkward in those days? And I was going to be a scientist and develop a cure, maybe for the beer virus that we've got now. But let's move on.
And, the beer virus, right?
Yes. Part of my very, very bad socially awkward humour, but that's okay. We'll keep moving. And we came across a scenario, me as a 16-year-old kid, where we had a long lost relative from the village, from back in Greece, who entered our lives and sold something to my family, to my parents. That was very good for him and not so good for our parents, not so good for our family. So, and he wouldn't leave until we signed, because that's how you did things back then. And this was a 16-year-old kid. This is 1987. So we signed, we didn't know. And then about 10 days later, the 87 stock market crash happened. So, and I distinctly remember my dear old dad saying, see, if we had bought some of that, we would have done our dough. They didn't even know. About 3 or 4 days later, we received the welcome pack, and there was no free look period. There was no advice, certainly no external dispute resolution scheme that there is these days back then. And we tried very much to get out of it, but it very much operated on a buyer beware type system. And even when we tried to get out of it, we discovered that this particular person had loaded not only the upfront entry fees, but also the back end exit fees. So 10% upfront, 10% exit, and the value of the exit fee was worth more than the value of the account. So right then and there, yes, I can see that look in your face, Clay. So you can imagine, I guess, yes. So right then and there, I was quite horrified and mortified. Someone who had a right brain type attitude. You know, it's about building a body of evidence. It's about building information, about doing always what's in the best interest of not so much the client, but always building what's in the best interest of humanity. And end of story, full stop. That's it. So I decided to move my passion, my destiny from math science to this. And I was determined that I was never going to let anyone do the same thing to other people. And here we are. Let's say that was when I was a 16-year-old kid. I recently turned 49, so that was 33 years ago.
That is, that's the equivalent of, I've heard a few times the insurance story, the story where people didn't have the insurance, and you know, I haven't heard this one. This one is equally as bad. You see a bunch of money being lost by a close family, and that moment in time being a game changer. Yeah, that's mate. Did you take a tire iron to the guy's kneecaps?
No. This guy, this particular person, went through all the friends and family in our village community here in Melbourne, and entered people's homes on the relationship, and swept through families. Dare I say, like a virus.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, it's there's 1 in 1,000. It might be more than that, but my view is now, having been with XY for a while, there's about 1 in 1,000 people that are just not very good people, and yeah, it's one of those things that if you become the victim of them, and obviously like there's a lot of those out there, if there's 1 in 1,000, and then they have their sort of set victims that they like to go after. And yeah, it's a real wake up call.
Clayton, I refuse to play the victim. I refuse to be part of the pity party. I've never been like that. I was never brought up to be like that. The only way you fix things, the only way you change things is you change things from within. Yeah. And so you either step in and get sucked in and sucked up by the mire and quagmire that is bad news, or you step up and you try and make lemonade out of lemons.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's probably that worldview, I think, is something that was one of the things that I connected with you digitally, of course, when I was seeing, the way that you were sort of helping such a huge amount of other advisors. So the question becomes, so now I understand why you're interested in seeing the positive evolution of financial advice is obviously because people, the better that advisors are, the less likely that, well, I should say the more likely that people will get better advice, and the less likely people will get bad advice. And that's a very good mandate. But so now diving in a little bit more, you've got 2 interns. What's going on there? Are they doing the professional year, or what's going on?
So not just yet, because obviously there's a process. In order, and I'm reading off, I've got the FASEA website up here at the moment. And in order to go through the professional year program, there's a structured program that we have to go through. And we're working through what that means, so we can get an understanding, so we can provide a structure for them. And it's been as much a learning experience for us as practitioners as it has been, I guess, for them, because I believe we're learning just as much, not only about the business and how we do things, but also about ourselves. And it's very much sort of dovetails into the estate planning and estate administration piece, because we want to make sure that we try and engage with the next generation. And here we are, we're employing the next generation, and we have to get a sense of how they think, how they act, how they speak, how they talk, why they talk. And then they, at the same time, have to get an understanding of why we do certain things in certain ways. So it really has been a fascinating journey, I would like to say, for both ends. I think with all the committee involvement that I've been in different avenues and different fields, this is something, professional year, that I've been really pushing for and advocating for, since I've started doing this all those years ago. Because if you think about it, you have a professional year, or you would call it, I guess, articles for lawyers. As an accountant, you have to, process 10,000 tax returns before you get even to speak to clients. In nurses and teachers, they have to go rounds. In the medical fraternity, I guess. Even as a tradesperson, you have to go through an apprenticeship. And even if you like, as a mortgage broker, there is a 2-year mandated mentoring period where you are with a mentor, and you bounce different strategies off them. So why something so important as financial planning has taken so long, where it's been forced upon us by government to have in place a professional year, is beyond me. There's lots of practices out there that have already built professional year type programs, and I salute them. And all they really will have to do is tweak them, because they already have their systems and processes in place anyway. And I believe, are the early adopters and the innovators, because they were doing it before it was even a thing.
Yeah.
And here we are. There are some interesting things that the FACEA PY program is putting forward to the profession, which I think is great. And I'm probably going to disturb, and the 0 people who listen to this podcast. I'll listen to it to see you, Clayton, but not to see me.
Right.
I believe, and my feeling is that if you see how advice is globally, and how advisors are accredited and educated globally, I believe that the system in Australia will get harder. I believe that to become an advice professional in Australia, it will become harder. It will become more difficult. Of course, that'll mean it may push out people who are already in the industry, and I use the I word there as opposed to the P word. But those people who stay, or those people who will continue, or who will choose what we do as an ongoing profession, and there's the P word, I think will be better for it. For the longest period of time, if you think about this, and if you think the example about how I became an advisor, it was all very much on soft skills. So we had the pendulum all the way this way, where we had very much soft skills, very much on relationship, and very, very little, if any, technical. And then we had all these scandals and inquiries and reviews and all sorts of stuff and everything. And the pendulum slowly swung this way, where the education system bred this entire cohort of very, very technically adept, very, very technically and strategically aware candidates, but they had no soft skills. So yeah. I applaud Steve and the team at FACEA for building something that has as one of its key components behavioural finance. Yeah,
it's well, in terms of the professional year, I think the fact that you're even thinking about it with probably more clarity than most conversations I have is a really good sign. I'm interested in seeing the profession move forward, and as most people are, I'm very interested in seeing that the professional year picks up the slack, which I guess was a bit of a hole. And if I think back to, because I actually came from tax accounting and into paraplanning, and making the leap from that technical side into advice was really difficult, because the facts are, if I was really good at my job, people didn't want me to move on to become a financial planner. Why would you? If you're a financial planner, why do you want your assistant who's doing such a good job to move on? You want them to stay there. And then if I was bad at my job, then you just get fired. So getting into advice was really difficult. And I think that having a professional year sets, I would even say, a good framework to attract smart, intelligent, capable, ambitious, what do you call them? Graduates from uni. It becomes, I think even putting the barriers up to entry makes it more appealing, because prior to a professional year, it was, well, how do you become an advisor? And it was, you somehow try and get there. And it's actually, there was no clear path. And this is a bit of a pathway. And so I definitely support it. What are you doing, or what are you anticipating, or how are you predicting that you're going to undertake this?
That's a fascinating question, and it's still a journey of discovery for us. And we're still going through this ourselves to understand what the ins and outs and ups and downs of the professional year entail. We've looked at other professions and other vocations to get an understanding of what they do. And I think I was at a conference a couple of years ago in LA, and I was speaking to the thing that I voiced to the speaker was, there are all these people coming through the system, but they've got really great technical skills, but their soft skills are garbage. How do you do it? And this gentleman, and we broke up into groups, and this particular gentleman was in my group, and he was a 72 years of age, and what he wanted to learn, and this is a guy who's been, he'd been an advisor for some 52 years, and what he wanted to learn, it was, he was very, very keen and very, very interested to learn more about, to learn about prospecting. And I just sat there and I've gone, mate, I've missed something here. Here you are, you're successful. It's a qualification only conference, and you want to learn about prospecting. And after the workshop, that particular workshop finished, and we went outside for a cup, and when I explained to him the dilemma I was going through, and he said to me, so when you have these newbies come on board, what do you do? And back in the day, what you used to do is you had a filing cabinet of all these clients, aka policy holders, and you were told, and I'm sure you remember this too, Clayton, you were told, here's a whole bunch of contacts, off you go. And even before then, you were given a telephone book, and you go, here you go and contact them.
Yeah.
And if you didn't sell, and if you didn't make meetings, you'd starve. But then if you look at how the legal fraternity, the accounting fraternity, the education and medico fraternity, mortgage broking, real estate agents, apprenticeships, what they do is you get these new candidates into the system, and they're put on the tools, and they are soft introduced to clients. And over time, there's a handover process. But for some reason, and I'll use the I word, the financial planning industry globally forgot that, because we lost it. We lost the whole process of best interest to humanity and about being sales. Now I get, and Baz Gardner talks a lot about this in terms of we're all old enough and ugly enough to realize that the S is not a dirty word. We do have to sell, and the better practices, advice, legal, even doctors. I've had some surgery on my hand here, and I was speaking to my my hand specialist, and even he realizes that a big part of his job is selling, which is quite fascinating. I felt. And this guy turned around and said, why aren't you, this guy in the States, why aren't you slowly passing on your safe clients, the clients that like you, the clients that you've been working with, the clients that don't know and understand the sort of advice that you provide, to the new people in the system, and you're the experienced one. You lead from
the front.
From the front. Thank you very much, brain. and you go out and prospect. You're telling these people, you have to build networks and you have to speak at these events and you have to do this, and you have to have these podcasts with the great Clayton to build the to build the profile even more. Why aren't you doing this? And I just sat there and I've gone, we've got the whole paradigm wrong. We've got our whole paradigm has always been based on sales, and we've talked about that, and there's lots and lots and lots of material out about that. But unless you've got that one striking moment where someone smacks a skill at the back of your head and really wakes you up and says hello, and unfortunately this is why we've had so many inquiries and scandals and all sorts of stuff, because it really has been based on sales.
Yeah. No, and there's no argument there, and it's come out of the life the life agency prior, and then superannuation, and I've thought about this a lot actually, and I'm getting a little bit clearer on my thoughts on this. Basically, prior to the internet and prior to the ability, for platforms like YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn, and prior to ways of being able to get in front of others in a scalable way. Realistically, it was, you can buy a logo and a phone number in a yellow pages, right? And the skill set then became, well, I have 1 hour to get someone from not knowing me to trusting me to doing business with me. And because it was, I guess, immature as an industry and no one even knew what financial advice was. And so the skill set became, how do I do better with that upfront hour? These days, we have things like, Facebook and podcasts and all these kind of things, and your ability to get in front of clients on a regular basis prior to that meeting has exploded. And so now it's a case of putting out a specific message tailored for a specific audience, and constantly talking to them about their problems and how you can solve their problems. And then people can get to know you. And we're in a position now where it's going to be hard to defend the idea that sales is now the main way to gain business. I feel like the whole purchasing paradigm, if you want to call it that, has shifted so much in favor of, people learning about what they want to purchase before they purchase it, that if now your skill set is simply, please get into my office and then listen to me for an hour and then purchase of me, I think you're very close to being able to fall off the boat. And as a result of all of that, as this whole industry moves further and further away from sales, I think, and I'm pretty certain, I've got actually a pretty clear path towards this, is that we're going to move from the I word to the P word. I think we're moving from the industry to the profession at the point where advisors receive tax deductions, or clients receive tax deductions for upfront advice purely based on the fact that an advisor gave them advice. And that for me will be a line in the sand that I've been quite passionate about. I had a really big meeting yesterday, and I'm really looking forward to actually starting to talk about the progress that XY has been making on this front. But it's kind of hard with all the different topics that are out there in the market at the moment. But as far as a line in the sand, I think that's a really good, clear picture to aim for, is the moment that the tax law says a financial advice providing advice is a tax deduction to the client. That for me is something I'm quite passionate about. And I think a part of that is FACIA, right? I think a part of that is the elevation of professional standards. Interestingly, the research, at least that I've looked at, and this is interesting, and it's kind of contrary to what I was expecting, but from what I've seen, the higher education does not equal higher ethics. That was actually a surprise to me. So scoping the E word out of FACIA for a moment, but at least, putting the standard up maybe won't make people more ethical. I think there's many ethical frameworks, and people will choose to use whatever framework that works best for them. And I'm sure most people think they're ethical anyway. The difference, I guess, is having a higher education standard, I think for the long term, is just going to draw in clearer pathways of better graduates. And I think over the next sort of 20 to 30 years, our conversations are going to seem dinosaur-esque.
It's funny you say that, Clayton, because I went to a PD. I took one of the interns today to a PD day. He's quite keen on also pursuing down the mortgage broking path. So we went to an AFG PD day. And we were talking to some of the other advisors who were there as well. And one of the conversation with these other advisors were, a bit of what I call the Antigone complex with me. The world's ended, really is like a Greek. And, the young fellow was looking at them, looking at me and looking at them. And then when we finished the conversation and he kept walking on, and he said to me, "You don't talk like that around us." And I said, because I think that we're in the most amazing opportunity for financial advice in Australia in our history.
Yeah.
And we can look at this. Once upon a time, when the great Bruce Lee was still around, he was being interviewed and he was being asked about human mindset and human paradigm and opinion. And what he said to the interviewer, he said, let your mind, should be like water, because water takes the shape of a teapot. Water takes the shape of a cup or a glass. So have your mind like that and change your paradigm, because it allows, rather than be structured into a particular box, it allows to take the shape of anything that it's in. And this is very hard for many people who are part of the establishment. Now, you mentioned the D word before, the dinosaurs. And we have to be very, very careful about ourselves being part of the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And see how we can embrace the change that is upon us. And the whole mechanism that is financial planning advice, if you think of the financial planning process, the last step in the financial planning process is review. And what does review mean? Stuff happens, life changes, and what do? We go all the way back again and start the whole process again. And yet, when we are faced with this, when we're faced with cultural change, education change, legislative, regulatory change, and there's a young lass who's on XY, I believe, called Hayley Pierce. And yes. I remember I was having a conversation with her at another event, and we were talking about things, and the V word, I talked about the V word being volatility. And Hayley looked at me and said, "I'm surprised that you used that word, Harry." And I said, "Which word?" And she said, "Volatility." And I said, "Well, I know what it means, Harry, but I'm surprised you still use the word volatility." I said, "Hayley, what do you use?" And she said, "Investment wobble." And it was just, again, it's just thinking about different words, because what does volatility mean from a chemical? This is my Sheldonness. I'm going into overdrive now. What does volatility mean? It means explosion. It means chemical reaction. It means people, going on this beer virus and buy toilet rolls by the Armageddon load. And all that happened is it just presents a buying opportunity. And I'd bet you London to a brick that there's a whole bunch of very, very, very wealthy investment houses who have been cashed up, who maybe even shorted the market, and they've now taken an interesting position where the markets have gone down. But that's my conspiracy stories. I wanted to touch on something that you said a second ago about, yes. And I've made some notes here because that's what we do, as advisors. You talked about the work that you and XY are doing about advice and tax deductions. Now, yes. One thing, again, it's just about changing the paradigm. Advice has been tax deductible from the word go. Yes. So part of sometimes, you hear these sayings and these parables and these fables and stuff like that, if a tree falls in the forest, did it ever happen? Yes. Now, if you think about this, people want to buy investment so it produces gain over the long term. And then at some particular point in time, you or the estate sells that investment and makes a profit. Well, how is the cost of advice any different to the buying cost on property? Okay. Yeah.
So it's a capital. I can definitely argue this. Yeah. No, definitely.
My extreme geeky nerdness.
I'm more than happy. I've thought about this substantially. So why I would say that a purchase price making up a capital base for an investment property differs for upfront financial advice. First of all, one is a real asset in terms of it is a physical thing that grows in value and has a purchase and a sale price.
Hold on there. Just hold on there, Clayton. Just hold on there.
Certainly.
So if we look at that scenario, let's say from a legal or a valuation or surveying or an accounting perspective,
yes,
all of those costs there are buying costs, and they add on to the buy price.
Correct. Yes.
Some particular point. So we just have to be better with our record keeping, isn't it? Right?
No. So it's because financial advice doesn't have a specific addendum in the tax law to allow upfront financial advice to be a tax deduction. And so as I was saying, you've got all these different attributes that make up the capital base price. And then at a later point, you've got a sale price. And then you take the sale price and you minus the cost base, and there you have your capital gain. There is no sale price to the advice. There is a benefit that is received as a result of advice, but there is I can't sell my SOA on the market 20 years from now. I can't say, this is the upfront piece of advice that I received. I paid $2,000 for it in 2020. Now that it's 2040, it's now worth $10,000. And it's not worth anything to anyone because the benefit that I've received has been intangible. It has been behavioral based, and it has by listening to the advice. Sure, I have increased my capital base. However, I have no capital expenditure that I can now deduct from the cost of my results. I think that's a pretty clear argument.
I would the stuff that I've read and the stuff that I've done would say that it is a capital cost.
Yes, that's the argument.
It is a capital cost.
The argument is that it is a capital cost. Absolutely, and I'm not disagreeing with you in the sense that is how it is currently interpreted. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying it's bullshit. I'm just saying I completely disagree with it. I'm saying that it's completely irrational, and and I want to see it change. That for me is a bit of a line in the sand. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that then for a second. If you think about who our regulators and which portion of which profession of the community has made up our regulators and legislators, it's not been financial advisors. Yes. It's been people who've had, I guess, what was perceived by the community to be some sort of formal education. You know, it has been accountants, it has been lawyers, it has been architects, it has been engineers, medicos, and the list goes on. So until we gladly embrace this concept of education, there are some people now in Australia who are now moving on to PhD. There is a raft of advisors in both the US or overseas who've got PhDs.
That's amazing.
And their studies are absolutely fascinating. And a lot of them are quantitative type studies, but there's a beginning of qualitative type studies. For example, La Trobe University until very recently, I'm not sure whether you're aware of La Trobe in sunny Sydney, but La Trobe University until recently, what they did as part of their mandatory curriculum for lawyers is not only do they want to produce good lawyers, good public advocates, but they also wanted to make sure they were good corporate citizens as well.
That's awesome.
Because the machine that is the legal education process, I guess, breeds a cohort of candidates who are, let's perhaps say, you only make money when you litigate.
Yeah.
So what La Trobe did is they introduced a mandatory subject of mindfulness.
Oh, that's cool.
How cool is that?
That's really cool.
And what they've done now is that there's a whole raft of studies in the legal fraternity to show how mindfulness makes for better corporate citizens from the legal fraternity. And isn't mindfulness just a fancy word for behavioral finance?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep.
Now, it might be a long bow, mate, but as I said to you before, we had these great soft skills, but very not so good technical skills. We had these great technical skills, but not so good other way around.
Yep.
And with the pendulum sort of swinging in the middle, people think the pendulum's all the way up here, but I don't really think so. The pendulum's here. The opportunity is globally the most amazing opportunity, and there are advisors overseas who are continuing to open up branches and open up markets from their home base. There's one advisor that I know who has branches in 35 jurisdictions around the world.
Wow.
There's another guy who I know who's got who's just opened up an office in Singapore, and that's his 9th jurisdiction. There's another guy who I know who was at the FPA conference last year, Phil Billingham, and he's got an office in the UK, in South Africa, and in New York in the US. Now, one of XY's members, Brett Evans, and his partner, oh my goodness, James Wrigley. Is it James Wrigley?
Yes.
James Wrigley.
Well
they're going great guns and taking over the planet with Atlas Wealth Management.
I recommended them. I recommended someone go visit them just 2 days ago.
Yeah. And there's Adam Turk as well with Harbourside Capital, who's doing great work as well. And I think we've been sucked in by product manufacturers and licensees, but unfortunately, because we haven't had a great big, we haven't had a strength in technical resources, in strategic resources, and they've accounted for the lowest common denominator.
Yes.
So that is, you can't give advice on this area. You can't give advice in this area. And quite frankly, why should they allow their advisors, their, dare I say, and I hate using this word, their distribution force, to do so when these guys, they don't want to study? So let me ask you a question, Clayton. And
Yes.
So we all know what the sole purpose test is, right?
Yep.
Because it's been smashed into us with the fees from superannuation and all that sort of stuff, okay?
Yep.
We all know the section, we all know the chapter and verse and all this sort of stuff and everything. But if I asked you a question, if I said to you, what is the concessional contribution gap?
Oh, okay. Well, it changes every year.
Like our prime ministers, but that's another story.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I haven't looked at it in the last 12
It's
months, but
25 grand.
I'm guessing it's around 30 grand. Yeah, okay, so 25.
25 grand. But why is it 25 grand? Now, I've asked this specific question to lots and lots and lots of advisors over the last 12 months. And they look at me and they go, oh, because the government changed the rules. And I said, I understand.
Oh, wait. So you're talking about the formula of the, no. Okay,
I'm asking how lawyers have become the preferred method. And Will Johns is another great example of a great advisor who understands the law, both a disability studies and contract law perspective. The advisors who seem to have not as much success with claims, it's because they look at the emotive reason why insurance companies should pay claims. But insurance companies have processes, have contracts, have definitions. So why lawyers have been successful is lawyers understand the law. Lawyers understand contract law. And effectively, when a TPD or when an insurance payment hasn't been paid, for all intents and purposes, it could be deemed as a breach of contract. Now, they know and understand this, just as we know that a concessional contribution cap is $25,000. But what chapter and verse of legislation is it?
Ooh, chapter and verse of, it's one of many, mate. I don't know.
But this is what I'm saying, is that we go to these conferences and these PD days and we hear the budget. I'm a budget nerd, and I'm sitting in front of the TV and I'm watching and I absorb all the information that comes out of the budget. Just by the by, if you guys set up an event where we can go into the lockdown rooms for these large investment houses and tech houses, I'm the first person to sign up and be there. I'd love to be in one of those rooms. But that just shows the extent of my social existence, so we'll move on. But I think things like having a professional year and having mentoring and coaching is so important, because it makes sure that the next generation of advisors, and not so much advisors, because there are a lot of good people who are going to be paraplanners or investment analysts or insurance claims management or underwriters or insert words, practice managers. Can you imagine, Clayton, and the other people out there listening to this? Why is there been so much emphasis on financial advice education, but there's been no emphasis about paraplanning education, about insurance education? Now, I've taught insurance risk management at uni. I've taught it. And it has nothing to do with insurance mismanagement. Nothing to do with it. The universities, seriously, well, there's no conversation about loadings, exclusions, no conversation about what is TP, what even is TPD.
What's it about?
It's about you have to do a risk needs analysis. This is how much your mortgage is. These are how much your debts are. This is how much this is. This is how much it is. But that's not insurance. The guys, the old school riskies who learnt about insurance used a risk needs analysis as a means to an end. Yes. But what they were very exceptionally good at, and I remember having a chat with Glenn James about this, what they were exceptionally good at was knowing the ins and outs and ups and downs of their policy and what paid and why you would use one policy over the other.
Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt.
And isn't that the same thing as knowing and understanding the particular section, chapter and verse of the concessional contribution cap and why it's $25,000?
Oof. You're probably right. I remember interviewing Sam Henderson. He said if he could redo his time, he'd probably read the Corpse Act and see how it affected his business. So I think you're probably right, mate. Yeah, I probably just took it as for granted that, I learnt from somewhere that whatever that year's concessional contribution cap was, and then there was some level of there was some level of formula between the non-concessional and the concessional. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was like 6 or 7 times or something like that. And that's how they sort of calculated the non-concessional. But you're probably right. It's one of the many things I think to learn over the course of becoming a financial planner. And it's so interesting because, if I look back maybe 10 years, and I was just sort of getting out of, I was merging out of tax accounting and into paraplanning. And if I sort of look at the cohort that I've come through with, that I've met during the years and the type of advisor that I see is out there, it's actually really well educated. They've got their marketing down pat. They've got their sales down pat. They've got their operations down pat. These are really quite capable people, and it's not necessarily that they belong to this age group. I think just the expectation was higher. It's a post-FOFA world. It's everyone, it's just the expectation has been elevated. And I have a lot of sort of empathy for the people that have operated in a certain environment. People like yourself seem to adapt quite well and seem to bounce quite well and, have the mind like a teapot, for example. But many others don't quite have that. And I have a lot of empathy for them because, at some stage, and I feel like it's coming around relatively shortly. My wife's 22 weeks pregnant. I'm about to, I'm not too far away from becoming a dad for the first time. And I feel like my set in stone-esque is just around the corner, and sort of, shifting a lot of things, whether it's operations or whether it's how I sell or it's how I market or it's how I give advice. There's so many different things that are in flux at the moment that I have a lot of empathy for those that have gone through it. But I will say that the level of people of advisor, of just, let's call it of a professional service person, the level of the professional service person has increased in advice I've seen over sort of the last 5 to 10 years. And all this professional year, I'm bullish on, like it's something that should have existed for a long time.
Absolutely.
I'm a little bit disappointed that there's not more clarification around what that looks like and how more advisors can Because I know many advisors that say, yeah, we don't know what to do, so we're not doing anything yet. Someone needs to come
Well,
along.
part of the problem is that part of the problem we have is, I think, and I'm guilty for this as well, is should we invest time, effort, energy, resources in building something only to be told don't?
Yeah.
Or only to be told that thing that you did, you can't do.
Yeah.
But I'm not so sure that approach is even appropriate. I feel it would be better, to steam forward and build some sort of program. And we're all going to, and I know that I can't swear on this, so I won't.
No, please do. Go for it. It's all yours.
We're all going to fuck up on this in any case. So, and that's just part of growth. I mean, you're going to go through, you and your wife are going through one of the most extraordinary experience in human evolution.
Yeah.
You are bringing new life into this world. Okay.
Crazy.
And new life is painful. New life involves change. New life involves a change in paradigm, how we think, our habits, our shopping. If you reckon the coronavirus changed your shopping habits, mate, wait till you start realizing what you really have to buy and what really is important as opposed to what you should be buying. But
what do you mean, toilet paper? What's going on?
So, look, I'm really, like you, I'm very, very bullish about our future. And not just only on an Australian perspective. I'm really bullish about this on a global perspective. Now, Zurich recently did some research about how they could quantify the value of advice, because all the inquiries and Royal Commission and all this sort of stuff have been talking about cost.
Yes.
And cost is a race to the bottom. That's
yes.
it. But value is not a race to the bottom. What we have to be very, very good at is how do we continue to quantify the value of advice.
Yes.
And Zurich's research showed that the relationship with an advisor either adds or saves 4.4% over a particular period of time to a client's portfolio. Now, that's no different from mentoring. It's no different to a professional year.
Yeah.
Because in the conversations I've had with you, and I'm quite happy to say this, I've learned a lot from you, Clayton.
And vice versa.
Because, we've had some interesting conversations over time. And you've often said to me, no, mate, this is not how it's done. It's done like this. And what I then have to do is get off my high horse and get off what I think and forcibly change my paradigm. Because that's just how it is. And I think if we, as you said, if we not so much become better marketers, I think knowledge professionals, which is what I think the financial advice profession is. I think knowledge professionals, by their very, by what we do, are good marketers. But I think that we're crap at articulation.
We're getting better, but yes.
I think a lot of the work that various industry organisations and like yourselves are doing is that you are continuing to highlight the benefit that advice brings to the community. But what I find quite fascinating is that after any traumatic event in Australia, the FPA and the AFA launch their pro bono. The FPA and the AFA and several licenses have gone into arrangements with the Cancer Council and whatnot in providing pro bono advice. Why aren't these being screamed from the absolute highest rooftops?
Yeah, well, I think...
Because if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead.
Yeah, it's I think because a lot of stuff, people have really good intentions and probably just as the reality rolls out, it doesn't match the expectation, would be my assumption.
If a client or their family, and this goes into the work that we do in the estate planning space, most people don't know what they know. And there's a bloke who I know in Adelaide. He's a partner I think he's founder of a practice called Barton's in Adelaide, where they specialise in providing advice to medicos. And I remember him delivering a talk in Orlando, I think it was, And he said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
So we're news hungry, or maybe not so much news hungry, but we are tabloid hungry, if you like.
Unfortunately, yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I think the better that we get at and when I say we should become better marketers, and thanks for pulling me up on that. Probably what I'm trying to get at is become better value-based marketers, letting people know what we do, letting people know how it improves their life, letting people know that even if technically if they spent 5 years trying to figure this all out, they could probably do it themselves, but do they really want to? Do they have the time? Is that the best use of their effort and time and focus? Or should they go to a trip to Rome with their family?
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I think my dear old dad's not well. He's losing a battle with Alzheimer's and dementia. And one of the things that he said to me many years ago was, son, if it's important to you, find the time.
I wish it's hard to argue
and
with.
That's it. Because right now I could probably, if I was to take a microscope or a telescope into you and your family situation, you don't have time for a baby.
Probably not, no.
But you're doing it.
Yeah, because we ran out of time. I got to 36 years old and I went, oh, God, okay, I guess it's time. Because, I'm sure it's okay. Fantastic.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that we say, oh, someone else will do it. And I've been guilty of this. Someone else will do this, or I don't have the time, or this, or that, or the cup broke.
Yeah.
But really? So I know, I'm not sure whether you and I have spoken about this, but I'm very bullish about what it is that we do. I'm very, very, and it's no secret that people know that I'm very, very passionate about our profession, and not just in an Australian perspective, in a global perspective as well. And this is why I'm also not only so passionate about delivering advice to, I guess, mum and dad consumer, but also making sure that the infrastructure, which is the professional year, which is the coaching, which is the mentoring, which is the education, if mum and dad can seek advice from better accredited, better qualified, better experienced, more empathetic, more knowledgeable, insert words, advisor, whether it's here or overseas, then isn't that really a good thing?
Yeah.
And this goes to the study that Zurich did, where like all this market, as Haley said, all this investment wobble, the market wobble that we're having, people are getting nervous and people are buying toilet paper. Goodness gracious me. But isn't it better to have these active communications, not only with clients, but with people in the business, with people in the community, to help them? And I don't really believe, one of the things that I'm struggling to wrap around my head is the concept of informed consent.
Oh yeah, this is how do you inform someone, right? Like
I'll
fully
explain.
informed. That is a tough. It's a tough position.
Because what informed consent, I believe, and I'm happy to be corrected, what informed consent seems to push towards is that a client understands.
Yeah, fully understands as well.
But if you look at the words very, very carefully, does informed consent means that the client fully understands, or does informed consent mean that we as professionals have fully explained something?
That's a good point.
So isn't it then our responsibility as a profession, whether we're here, whether we're overseas, whether we're providing advice, or whether we're bricklaying? Not that there's nothing wrong with bricklayers, but isn't it our professional responsibility to know our stuff so well that we can explain the ins and outs and ups and downs? And again, this is my Sheldonness, my right brain thing. How I learn is, if you think about the equation 1 + 1 = 2, it's easy to teach someone 1 + 1 = 2 because you're solving for two. But what's the relationship of the first one and the second one and the plus and the equals? And we have to be able to no one understand the relationship of the equation that all ends. And this then goes into not only the professional year coaching and mentoring of our colleagues, of those people in our practice, but isn't it then us providing that same professional year in coaching in every single meeting we have with a client?
Yeah, it's a very good point. Our job is either to learn or to teach, and I think the standard is very high. I think if clients really did have total informed consent, technically, let's scope out financial advice for a moment. Let's say it's building a house, and they give total informed consent of the house getting built. If they fully understand how that house is getting built, well, it's how are they going to understand that you need to go 12 meters deep to set up the foundations? And I know nothing of construction, but for me to say that I can say that the builder has done a really good job in explaining it to me, but I mean, it's a high precedent, and I think this is probably a discussion that we'll have over many years. Harry, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for years, and I'm glad we finally made it happen. For all the advisors out there that want to reach out and say hi for any number of reasons, I know you're overly generous with your help and your time. How would someone go about contacting you?
Very difficult to get a hold of me on a mobile because I very rarely answer it these days. Very difficult to get a hold of me at the office because that's why we employ people to act as gatekeepers. But I also, that's how it is basically. I always answer my messages, so SMS messages. Always answer LinkedIn. Unfortunately, spend too much time on social media. So I guess if it's important enough, I'll find the time, and we'll find the time to make that conversation. But I'm always available. Always available. I've been very fortunate. Very, very fortunate in my not only my career but my life in having access to great mentors, access to people who took me under their wings, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes forcibly, and gave me a boot up the sometimes when it was necessary, sometimes when I thought it wasn't necessary, and that's just formed the person that I am today. So it's important that we give back. It's important, and this is why, again, I'm passionate about the coaching and the mentoring and the education, and having interns come into the practice, sharing, collaborating, coaching, whatever those words are. Now, I can't possibly begin to tell you how amazing this vocation has been for me. It's been as amazing in its positive experiences as has been in its sometimes the most traumatic of experiences. And I won't say negative, because sometimes in the darkest moments, when we're dealing with clients and family and friends who are experiencing death and pain, it's in those sorts of circumstances we find that we grow the most. So on that note, I also want to express a deep level of gratitude to you, mate, and to your colleagues at XY. And I'm just a little bit pissed off that I didn't think of it myself first. I'm going to say it.
Mate, we wouldn't be here without you, let me guarantee you, because we're facilitators more than anything else. And if it wasn't people answering intelligently and driving the positive evolution of financial advice, then we would have ceased many, many years ago. So with many thanks for being a part of the community for so long. But again, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so glad I can finally tick this guest off my list. So I appreciate you spending the time.
Hopefully, mate. One of many, mate.
Done. Cheers, mate. Thanks so much.
Yeah, buddy. Have a great one.